Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. I am making a video today that I have wanted to make for a while. I asked you guys on my Instagram yesterday if you would be interested in hearing like a story time type video about my experience as a Scareactor or Scareactor, depending on how you pronounce it, at Halloween Horror Nights, and a lot of you guys were extremely interested, which I'm pleasantly surprised because I wasn't really sure it could have gone either way. I'm so excited to share with you guys my experience working as a Scareactor. I pronounce it Scareactor. As a Scareactor at Universal's Halloween Horror Nights in Orlando. And I'll just go ahead and jump right into the experience that I had, and it's not just gonna be like a start to end, like this is one story that happened. It's just my whole entire experience as being a performer for this event, because I did it for 3 years. Excited to share with you guys some like details about how it works and what it's like and all of that kind of stuff. I originally started with Disney auditions. I wanted to be a face character at Disney, and I went to 4 Disney auditions, and they are like so much more intense than a Universal audition. So the Disney auditions are like phases. 3 times I went, I didn't get past the first phase, and there's usually anywhere between like, and this is like a side tangent, but this is just a segue into my auditioning at Universal, so I'll make this quick. But at Disney auditions, there's anywhere from like, I went to one that had as few as like 50-ish people, and then I went to one that had like 400 people. And they just kind of like put an audition posting up, and they ask for, oh, we're looking for someone to play Aurora and Snow White and Peter Pan, or whatever the characters that they need at the time. And they have specific body builds and heights that they require when you go into audition. So if you show up and you know that you're not like the build that they want, then you're obviously not gonna get picked. But anyways, I auditioned 3 times. One time I actually got all the way to the end of the audition. I got picked out of like a couple hundred people. They had me like done up as Snow White. So the last part, I was in full character costume, dressed up as Snow White, and I remember when the girl that was doing my makeup, she did not do a very good job. So I was like, it kind of threw me off, and I was like a little bit upset about it. Like, I did not look good at all. And I think it was because it was the end of the day, and they wanted to go home and stuff like that. So I don't know. I don't know why my makeup didn't look good, but it didn't. And so I was like a little bit upset about that. So when I went in to do like the final part of the audition, I like kind of like choked a little bit, and I didn't get the part. But it was a blessing in disguise. So anyways, that happened with Disney. So I was like, you know what? Let me just try Universal, because I really wanted to be a performer. I was in color guard all throughout high school, 4 years. I was the captain for 2 years. And if you guys don't know what color guard is, it's the people that twirl the flags and the rifles and the sabers for the marching band. So I loved that. And I wanted to continue performing in any way that I could after I got out of high school. So anyways, back to my auditioning for Universal. So I went to audition for Halloween Horror Nights, and the Universal auditions are way easier. So much easier for Halloween Horror Nights. All I can say is they basically are just wanting to, from my understanding and the way they pick people, is your look, your build, and your energy, basically. You basically just go into a room with a bunch of people. It's like 25 people, I think. And they'll usually just ask you a question like, oh, what's your favorite candy? Or what's your favorite movie or horror movie or whatever. And the 3 times that I auditioned, because you still have to audition every year, it was, what was your favorite horror movie? The next year was, what was your favorite Halloween candy? And the next one was, what was your favorite horror movie again? So I don't know, they probably just rotate through a couple of different questions every single audition. So finally, after like a couple years of auditioning for Disney and all that mess, I finally got picked to do Halloween Horror Nights in 2014. So I did Halloween Horror Nights from 2014, 2015, and 2016, but 2014 was my first year. And I was lucky enough to have the absolute pleasure, now looking back, I didn't know it at the time, but the absolute pleasure of being a street Scareactor, which is like, to me, I mean, everyone who has been a Scareactor has their preference on what they enjoy doing, but I love doing the streets, and most people do. Like in a scare zone as opposed to a house, you have a lot more freedom to scare how you want, move around more, And if you're lucky enough, people will take pictures of you and you get to see them. Because when you're a house Scareactor, people aren't supposed to be taking pictures inside the houses. So it's very rare. I mean, some people still do. Obviously, there's going to be people who do that, but it's kind of rare if you ever find a picture of yourself actually in action in a house. But anyways, back to the story. So my first year, I was in the scare zone called Maskerade. And it was called Maskerade Unstitched. And basically the premise of the whole scare zone was that we were like these like ballroom dancers that we were, attending a masquerade, and we had like cut off like pieces of our faces. The way it was explained to us when they were telling us what our role was that our faces were like cutting off our faces and sewing them back on and things like that. So it was just like a gory like masquerade ball. And then the second year, ironically enough, I got cast in the street again. And I originally was going to be in a different scare zone. I was actually going to be in the Icon scare zone, and I was going to be one of the usher minions. Like he was one of the icons in that scare zone, and I was supposed to be one of the girls that was like on his little stage with him. But they switched me last minute, and ironically enough, I got cast as none other than Snow White in Scarytales Screampunk. And this was HHN 25. It was so perfect. I was so happy. That was one of my favorite roles that I ever did, was this scare zone. And also, ironically enough, it was in the exact same spot as the previous year that I was in the streets. And it's like in between the Minion and the Shrek ride. That's the 2 years that I was in the streets. And then the last year that I did it was 2016. And this was the year. It was kind of funny because I had gotten so accustomed to being in the street and having that freedom and just really enjoying the streets. And then the last year that I did it, I was cast in a house. And I was a little bit sad at first, to be honest, because I was like, I so loved being in the streets so much because I got to see so many people, and people knew, that's what people knew me for, like people that I went to school with and like my sisters and stuff like that. They could come and see me. So it was exciting to be in the streets and be able to interact with people. But I still was, even though I was a little bit sad about not having that aspect of the job, I was excited to experience what it was like to be in a house because I always thought that was really cool. And the year that I was in a house, I was actually cast in The Exorcist. So The Exorcist house had basically like, I want to say there was probably anywhere between like 10 to 15 of us, and we were all Reagan. So if you haven't seen The Exorcist, Reagan is the little girl that has a demon living inside of her, and they basically are trying to do an exorcism to get the demon out of her. So it was basically like 10 to 15, 5'2" or under petite girls that were dressed up to be demonic little girls. And it was a lot of fun because The Exorcist is one of my favorite horror films. Like, to me, that kind of stuff freaks me out. So I was excited that I got to finally like play a character that was scary, like actually scary and not just kind of cute. So those are the 3 years that I did Halloween Horror Nights. So my first year, of course, is like always going to be near and dear to my heart because I think it was a lot, and a lot of people said this at the time too, like that scare zone was like beautiful. It was so pretty, and the music was like so haunting because it was supposed to be like a ballroom. And I had a lot of fun doing that. My costume was a lot. I had to wear, so when I went into work, I just had on like Nike shorts on and like just a black tank top. And then I had to put on a hoop skirt. I was wearing a hoop skirt on my hips, and it was like a giant hoop skirt. And then I was wearing a ballroom dress that was made out of curtains. The costume designer told me it was made out of, and it felt like really heavy, thick curtains. And then I had a little half face mask that was like on a stick, like a masquerade mask. And that was my costume for that. This was the year that I figured out like how to perform in this kind of way, because I was used to performing like, you know, in color guard, most of the time you're like smiling and you're looking up and you're being, you know, cute and perfect and everything. And I had to take on a totally different role, being scary, but it was also kind of difficult because I still looked like pretty. It was just my normal look, but I had like blood smeared on my face, or like they made it look like my eye had been torn off or something like that. So I was a little bit scary, but I had to get really creative because it wasn't just like, if you were to just see me from this side, you couldn't even tell that there was anything different about me. But it was really fun to learn how to scare people, and that cast, a lot of people when they do Halloween Horror Nights, they get really, really close in their casts. And I've always been someone who's just like, I always feel like I'm not cool, or like, you know, people think I'm weird. So I was always kind of just like a little to myself every year. But it didn't mean that I didn't like anyone. Like I got along fine with all the people that I've ever worked with at Halloween Horror Nights. I was just never one of those people that was like super outgoing and like threw myself into a new group of friends just because I was like, I don't think they like me, so I'm just gonna stay over here. So my first year was really fun, and I got a lot of good pictures that year. Overall, it was a blast. And then the next year in Scarytales, this was seriously the role that I was so excited for. I want to go ahead and preface it. This is like all kind of like scatterbrained and out of order because I don't really, like, there's no way for me to just do it like, you know, like chronologically or whatever, just because there's so many like things that go into this experience. But when you get cast for Halloween Horror Nights, unless it's like a specific role, and I don't even know this for sure, I'm just saying from my personal experience, they don't tell you what they're casting you for. They just tell you yes or no, basically. And unless you're like a stilt walker, I think sometimes they have you audition differently if you're supposed to be like a chainsaw person. But if you're just a general Scareactor, that can go like anywhere. They don't tell you what your role is gonna be until you go to the first rehearsal. So I didn't know what I was gonna be. And then I got the email that said that I was gonna be like an usher minion or whatever. And then I went to that first rehearsal, and then after that, because there's a few rehearsals, after that initial rehearsal, they like fit me in the costume and everything. I got a call from one of the stage managers, and she was like, do you mind switching into another scare zone? And I was like, what is it? Because I was already like in my mind gonna be this one role. And she was like, well, it's the Snow White character for the steampunk themed fairy tale section. Would you want to be it? And I was like, yeah. Because in my mind, I was like, this is fate. This is why I was not meant to be a Disney Snow White. I was meant to be like a creepy steampunk Snow White. I was Snow White in the steampunk, or it was called Screampunk scare zone. And this was a really cool scare zone as well. It had this big like contraption thing. I don't even honestly remember. I think it was a hot air balloon or something like that. It had a bunch of gears and things like that. Just like in the middle of the street, and all of the characters would just like kind of walk around and, you know, do their thing. So I had on like my Snow White outfit, I had like a corset, I had this bow that had like gear on it, and I wore like boots and everything. And then there was like this whole ordeal with one of my accessories, and it was the apple. Like, you know, in the movie Snow White, she bites into the poison apple and da-da-da, you guys know the story. Well, for some of the run, I was holding an apple. And then the last half of it, I had like this half face mask that covered from like underneath my eyes all the way down to my chin. And it was like a face that had an apple in her mouth. So that was, my costume kind of like switched up a little bit. But it was super fun. Like, one of my scares with the apple thing is I would just like ask people if they wanted a bite of my apple, and it scared the heck out of them for whatever reason. I feel like people are like already on edge when they get into a scare zone. So if you just say like, hi, like they're gonna freak out. That was something I would do with my like my handheld apple. But when I had the face mask on, I couldn't really do quite as much. So I would just kind of like growl at people and stuff. Yeah, that was another role that was like, I was kind of still a little bit cute looking, so I had to get creative with my scares, but it was still a lot of fun. So that was my experience as Snow White. That was super fun. I also had really good makeup artists in that scare zone. I still follow some of those people that were my makeup artists, and they're so talented and so awesome. Being Snow White was such a blast, and I'm glad that I got to experience that in a different way than I thought I was originally going to experience it when I was like auditioning for Disney. So the last role that I was as a Scareactor was Reagan in the Exorcist house. And it was really cool to see the difference of being in a street and being in a house. I think overall in general, Again, this is all from my personal experience. In general, I feel like the people that are cast in houses are a little more mellow, and the people in the streets are kind of like crazy. Like, not just their characters, but like when we're offset, they're a little bit like crazy. And that's another thing that I did want to mention, was that for every house or scare zone, there's different casts, which is like, I feel like it's self-explanatory, but if you don't know what that means, it's like there's a certain amount of people on set at all times, but then there's also like your tag outs, which is like the people that are the same people as you, but you just, it's so you can get a break, and you constantly are rotating all throughout the night. It's 45 minutes on, 45 minutes off. So I would be on set for 45 minutes, and then the girl who would come and replace me for that 45 minutes would come on, and then you would be on a break. So you would get a break every 45 minutes. Like when I originally like started, I was like, I get to have a break for 45 minutes all night, like continuously. But trust me, like when you're a Scareactor, it's not even like really a break. Like you literally have to rest like that. Otherwise you will not be able to make it through the rest of the night. And I will say that another thing is too, when you're a Scareactor, you are not allowed to take any pictures of yourself when you're in makeup, backstage, none of it. And for people that have like, I remember like some people would be like, oh, send me a picture of what you look like or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's like the hugest like no, like you are not allowed to do that. And that's why. It's just like character integrity and, you know, like that kind of thing. So for The Exorcist, that was probably one of the most elaborate costumes that I had to wear, because before I even started like rehearsals, I had to go to an eye doctor and get fitted for contacts, because I had to wear like costume contacts that were, they didn't have any like prescription in them. They were just colored, because they wanted our eyes to look like that really creepy green looking color. So my costume consisted of, I was wearing a nightgown, like a long nightgown, and I had contacts in, colored contacts. I had to wear a wig cap and then a wig, and then they would spray, like they would paint my whole entire face like a whitish gray color and like put like puke on me and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, even if you saw me in person, you wouldn't even know it's me. So my role in that house was, and this was different too from the streets, because in the streets you're pretty much a lot, for the most part. I mean, sometimes the stage managers of your street will tell you to stay in a specific section, but I was lucky enough, for the most part, I was allowed to go pretty much anywhere I wanted, because I was in a very small scare zone. But I know like the bigger scare zones, you definitely well, I shouldn't even say definitely, I don't know, I've never been in them, but I'm pretty sure you have to stay in like certain areas, because it's just to make sure that, you know, your tag out can find you and that kind of stuff. But anyways, in the house, I was designated to one spot, and I was in a hallway across from another Reagan, and it was kind of like we would take turns. Like there would be a strobe light on me, and I would like go off and be scary for a few minutes, and then the strobe light would go to her, and we would go back and forth. And it was a little bit difficult in the beginning to figure out how I was going to scare people without like being able to move around. But I basically just had to act like I was having an exorcist. I would just like go crazy and like flail my arms around and stuff like that. And I remember the first night, opening night for that year, my legs were completely destroyed, because I get so into it when I'm in character. Like I want people to believe me, and I enjoy it. Like it's almost like a high. Like when you get someone scared, it's like, okay, let's scare the next person. So I would always try my best to like genuinely scare someone. Like I wanted them to be creeped out by me, and sometimes just creeping someone out is like scarier than like screaming at them. But anyways, like my legs were all bruised up and everything like that. And there was even an instance when I was Reagan in The Exorcist that my eyes were like destroyed, because those contacts were so thick. It literally looked like I was looking through like 2 straws. That's as much as I could see when I was wearing those contacts, on top of there being a strobe light in my face. So my eye actually got like, I don't know if it was like an infection or what, but I had like a yellow bubble across one of my eyes, and I couldn't wear the contacts for a few days. The pain you go through to do this job. Again, that was a lot of fun, and I'm glad that I was able to experience both sides of the event. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to do it again someday. I would love, love, love to do it again someday, because it's seriously, being a Scareactor is the best job I have ever had by far. It is the most exhausting and physically demanding job that I can think of, besides of course like the obvious things like being like a firefighter or a paramedic or being in the military, obviously. Besides those things like that, I don't know any other job that requires that level of energy and physical demand. And there were, whenever I did Halloween Horror Nights, I only did Halloween Horror Nights. I didn't work another job. And there were some people that would literally work their regular 9 to 5 and also do Halloween Horror Nights. And I don't even know how they like survived. Like genuinely, I really don't. That was my experience with Halloween Horror Nights. I loved it. I would love to do it again one day. We'll see if that ever happens. Being a mom now makes it a little bit less likely that it'll happen just because it is so demanding in every way. But we'll see. I did want to go ahead and answer some of your guys' questions because I asked if you guys had any questions, and there were surprisingly a lot of questions about being a Scareactor at Halloween Horror Nights. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull up those questions that you guys left on my Instagram and answer some of them. Okay, so the first question that I'll answer, just because it was asked by a few of you, is what the process is start to finish, from like auditioning to actually being in it and what the roles actually require. So auditioning for a Scareactor is pretty simple. If you are wondering when the auditions are, all you have to do is go to universalauditions.com. I believe that's the website, or you can just look. I literally Googled Universal Orlando Halloween Horror Nights auditions. And it came up with the website. But it'll tell you what days they're auditioning. And if you were even thinking about doing it, if you want to do it, just go to one of the auditions, even if they don't pick you. But the sooner you go like in the game, I think they start auditioning like open auditions. I want to say it's in June or July. So as soon as you see that audition get posted, I would just go ahead and reserve your date to go and audition, because the earlier you do it, the more likely you'll be picked, because towards the end, they get a little more specific about the roles they need to fill. So anyways, you basically just make an appointment online, and then you show up to the Human Resources building and you wait to be called into a group. And then once you're in that group, it's like take you in like a big group first, and then they call you out like by 25 people. So you're all in like this room and you're sitting there, and they go, okay, numbers 1 through 25, let's go. And then after that, you go into another room, and then you'll, sit in front of the important people that make the decisions, and you'll all just line up, and then they'll ask you what your name is and what your favorite candy is or whatever. And then you're done. That's literally the audition process. It's a super easy process. They're basically just looking to see what you look like and your energy. But I would say you don't have to be nervous or scared or anything like that. Like, I was going into this audition thinking they were gonna have me they were gonna look at me and be like, okay, we need you to act like a banshee for 20 seconds. And then I was gonna have to do something on the spot, but it's not like that. It's much, much more laid back. But after you audition, they tell you then and there if you got cast or not. And after that, like a month or so goes by, and then you'll get an email, and then they'll tell you what your rehearsal date is. They don't tell you what you actually are until you get to rehearsal. And I don't know if this is gonna surprise some people or not, but there's literally only 2 to 3 rehearsals before the event starts, and that's it. Like, in my mind, I would think that it's because they can't, you kind of just have to just go off with it and just get the event started, because if they spent like months and months like training people and like rehearsing and stuff like that, I feel like it would just be a waste of time. So they just tell you what you are, and they put you in your costume, and then you have like a night or two to kind of like get into the groove of your character and figure out how to scare. And then they do employee preview, and then the event starts. Once you are at rehearsals and stuff like that, they tell you what your call time is going to be for the entire event. Some people's call times are earlier, some are later, but typically what happens is if you have an earlier call time, you get out first. And if you have a later call time, you get out later. So I've had call times as early as 4:30. I've had call times as late as 7, I believe it was 7:15 or 7, something like that. Somewhere close to 7 o'clock. And there's usually anywhere between 4 to 6 cast changes per night, which means that you'll basically have 4 sets. So you go on for 45 minutes, and then you rest for 45 minutes, and then you go on for 45 minutes, and that's your whole night. And I would get out of work anywhere between, I got out as early as when I did it in 2014, they still had the midnight closings. Now I don't even think they do that anymore. I think it's only 1 and 2 o'clock closings. So there was nights in 2014, my very first year that I did it, I would get out at midnight. And then the last year I did it, there were some nights I would get out at like 2:15 in the morning. So I was getting home anywhere between like 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning. That is pretty much the entire process of like start to finish and then being in it. I can't think of like any other details that go into it, like as far as like schedule and things like that. There are different roles that are more strenuous than others. I would say being in the streets is a little more taxing physically because you have to move around a lot. And when you're in a house, you're just, for the most part, standing in one spot. I remember the first year that I did it, I lost like 12 pounds at the time. Like that was the thinnest I have ever been in my entire life. It would hurt when I would sit down in my car. I remember like I would drive to work and it would hurt sitting because my tailbone was like, there was like no cushion on it. I think I weighed like 112 because and it wasn't because I was like starving myself. It was just because I literally would get like 35,000 steps almost every single night working in the streets. So you really have to take good care of your body when you are doing this. Like you have to drink a ton of water. You have to make sure you're eating enough and things like that. And not like eating like crap food because then you'll just like crash and burn. But there are a lot of people who like take off sprinting as soon as the event starts and they crash and burn and then they end up quitting halfway through the event. But it's extremely tiring and it's probably the most sleep deprived I've ever been in my entire life besides having a baby. I would put having a baby first and then Halloween Horror Nights second as far as like exhaustion goes. That's how very physically demanding it is. Okay, so the next question is, what was my favorite character that I played at Halloween Horror Nights? And I think that it's really hard because all of them have their good parts to it, but I think my favorite role that I was Snow White. Okay, someone asked what the most awkward guest interaction was. There's two that come to my mind just off the top of my head. And the first one was when I was Snow White. I went to go like put my apple in front of someone's face and I just flung it. And we both just kind of like looked at each other and I just like kind of like scurried off and like picked up my apple off the floor. That was a fail. And the second awkward one was when I was in The Exorcist and I was Reagan and I scared this lady and she walked through my room. Well, she walked through my room and I scared her. And her reaction was to put her fingers up my nose. Like she was like, ah! And I was just kind of like, Okay, what is the most difficult and what is the best part of being a scare actor? I think I explained this like in my first question. The most difficult part is the physical demands of it. Like it seriously is so physically demanding. Like trying to entertain and scare and run around and, you know, act crazy and stuff like that when you're freaking exhausted is very challenging. And on top of that, like you end up getting like battered and stuff like that. Like I was constantly bruised. My feet were blistered. Like it was just, your body just feels like battered and torn up and you're exhausted. So that's definitely the hardest part of it. But I would say the best part is that for me, it was like I got to perform and challenge myself to like perform in different ways. And on top of it, this might sound vain, but I don't know. I'm probably not the only one that thinks this, but it's really cool for people to come and like look for you. Like they know that you're at Halloween Horror Nights and they like seek you out and they want to take pictures of you, and like seeing like your pictures online and like photographers will take really cool pictures of you and stuff like that. That part was like one of my favorite parts to me. I thought that was really cool. I also liked the costuming aspect. I loved like getting dressed up and like getting the full makeup on and everything. I thought that part was so fun. That was like my favorite part of my night, was when I would sit down in the makeup chair to get my makeup done. Okay, someone asked, has anyone ever gotten mad at you or reacted in a crazy way when you scared them? And this was almost like a nightly thing, to be honest. So I kind of like blocked a lot of it out. It was just kind of like an occurrence that happened every night because everybody reacts differently to when they get scared. But I remember there was this one lady that I scared when I was in, I believe it was Maskerade. I scared her and she got mad. I didn't even do anything crazy, but I just scared her and she startled. And she like got all up in my face and she was like, I am a Marine and I know how to kill you with my bare hands. And I was like, lady, you paid to be here to get scared. I'm just doing my job. I didn't say this to her, but I would just like, I did this thing and I just kind of backed up with the double chin and everything. So the next question is, did I ever break character? And there was only a handful of times that I ever broke character, and they were for serious reasons. One of the reasons was people were smoking in our scare zone, and those costumes are extremely flammable, and I was not trying to catch on fire and be a candlestick that night or any night. So whenever I would see someone smoking, I would tell my my coordinator or my stage manager or whoever was there immediately. Another time that I would break character is if someone like physically like maliciously like put their hands on me. If they pushed me or anything like that, I would go and run and tell security, whoever. I literally had no problem getting people kicked out, because that is one thing I will say about Universal is they take very good care of their employees and their team members, and one of their top priorities is to make sure that we were safe when we were doing our job, because like I said, there are just people who, one, react differently when they get scared, and sometimes that reaction is like a physical reaction, and you can tell when it's malicious or not. And then two, there are of course the people that go to Halloween Horror Nights just to be, for a lack of a better term, assholes. Like, they just really are. And they go to get as wasted as possible. They go to mess with the characters and things like that. And when I saw those kinds of people, I would just break character and let, you know, like I said, my coordinator or stage manager know about it. Because in my mind, I was thinking, I don't want them to go to the next scare zone or the next house and do something worse because no one said anything. So the next question is, what is the funniest scare that you got? And I just thought of this too, but there was actually, this was probably the best one ever. And it was this lady walking through my room when I was in The Exorcist. And I scared her, and she went up against the wall, slid down the wall, and was like, oh my God, I just peed! And she started crawling. Like, she didn't even get up. My room was a hallway, so she crawled the entire way out of my room. And I was like, my job is done here. This is perfect. That was the best scare ever. The next question is, what is the rudest guest experience you had? And to be honest, I had a lot of them. I had a guy dump an entire beer all over me. I had people, like when I was in the streets, people would call me a slut. People would, you know, just things like that. And you know, when I very first started, I would be like, why would they call me that? But it's like I said, there's people that literally go to just be buttheads the whole time, and they just want to get a reaction out of the characters. Another thing is too, when people would try and scare us, like, I don't know why people think that's a good idea, because it's not, and it's not funny, but it's just, what usually happens is people will try and scare us and we won't get scared, and we'll just look at them, and then they get pissed and they'll start calling you names and things like that. So those are the rude guest interactions that I would have like almost nightly. So another question is, did anyone ever hit you? And the answer is yes. I actually got punched in the face. I obviously, like, it wasn't like super serious, but the lady did punch me in the face. And she like cussed me out because I scared her in The Exorcist. I had her escorted out by security when that happened, because she wasn't just doing it out of being scared. Like, she was like, she saw me and then punched me. And then there was plenty of times where I would get like shoved and, you know, things like that. So people were always like doing that kind of stuff, but that was probably the worst one, was when I got punched in the face. All right, this is the last question I'm gonna ask because my daughter just woke up from her nap, so I'm gonna go get her. But the last question is, who did your makeup? And I will say that every night that I went in, I did a full entire face of makeup, except for The Exorcist, just because my entire face would get covered up again, but I would still do a little bit of makeup. But for Maskerade and Scarytales, I would do an entire face of makeup, like a heavy face of makeup, because I was in the streets and the makeup that I got on top of that wasn't a whole lot. So I would use my regular makeup as a base, and then they would do the costume makeup over me. And they have like a makeup tent where when you go in and clock in, you go in and get your makeup done. So whatever your character requires as far as makeup goes, they do that on your face. For Maskerade, it was usually like a bloody eye or something like that. And then for Snow White, usually they would put like veins on me and things like that, and like make my eyebrows a little more intense. Like airbrush makeup all over my arms with like to make my veins look more like sickly and things like that. And then for Reagan, they completely did me up. Like I was just like white makeup, puke on my face, all that kinds of stuff. So it's all airbrush and like silicone stuff and things like that. But they're all of that stuff is done by the makeup artists at Universal that they have for every area of the event. So no one's doing their own costume makeup. And that's another thing too, is that before you leave for the night, you have to take off every single thing of makeup before you leave. You're not allowed to clock out before you have the costume makeup on, because no guest is allowed to see you off the clock with the makeup on. But anyways, that is going to conclude this kind of story time slash Q&A type super long chatty video about my experience as a Scareactor at Universal Orlando's Halloween Horror Nights. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and if I didn't answer your question, I'm sorry, but go ahead and leave that question below in the comments and I will answer it there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you are a Halloween Horror Nights fan, or if you are someone that went and you saw me there or anything like that, I love to hear from you guys in the comment section below, because I am a Halloween Horror Nights like super fan. Actually, I shouldn't say super fan. I'm not. There are some serious super fans, but I am a fan of it. So I'd love to, you know, chat with you guys in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.